Welcome to BACKtalk, the premier podcast from Successful Black Parenting Magazine, featuring in-depth conversations and expert insights on crucial topics for Black families. We are ranked number one in Black Family Podcasts on FeedSpot and now number one on Million Podcasts as well. And now Successful Black Parenting has an interactive community of like-minded Black parents called the Black Parenting Academy, where you can converse and post questions, comments, wins, and concerns in a safe space. And I'll be sharing that link later during the show. I'm your host, Janice Robinson-Celeste. Now, what could your child achieve if they really believed there was no limits? What if they were destined to walk among the stars, but the only thing holding them back was that they've never seen someone who looks like them do it? Well, that's about to change today, so stay tuned.
This is BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the most listened to podcast for parents by parents.
Hello, Successful Black parents. Thank you for tuning in to BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, your go-to podcast talk show for parents. We are live, and that means you can post your questions in the comment section of our Facebook or YouTube pages, and I will address your questions on air. Don't forget to share our podcast with your friends, shout it out to your followers, because sharing is truly caring. And don't forget to use hashtag BACKtalk when you post. You know, we have so many interesting people as guests on BACKtalk, and today is no exception. I have in the studio Dr. Bernard A. Harris Jr., and not only was he an astronaut, but he was the first Black astronaut to ever perform a spacewalk. He's done that and so much more. Let's welcome Dr. Harris to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Janice. Glad to be with you.
Well, I gave you an introduction, but you've done so much and you're involved in so many new things now. Can you introduce yourself and tell us, what inspired you to also become an astronaut? That's two questions, but let's start with just introducing yourself.
Well, sometimes I like to start by saying that I am a physician. So you've already talked about that, who became an astronaut, who then became an entrepreneur, who then became a philanthropist, who then became a whole bunch of other things. And I say that to sort of link all of those things. My dream of doing all those things came about because in 1969, I saw Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin land on the moon. And when I saw that, I got excited about the possibility of traveling in space. And so that's how it all began.
All right. That's amazing. And you didn't let anything stop you with that thought. You didn't look and say, well, I never seen a Black person do it, so I can't do it. So did you grow up with that mindset that you could do anything?
Well, let me take you back to the 60s, right?
Yeah.
I was 13 years old. Prior to that, we had the civil rights movement that was happening. I got to see that old enough to see that unfold before my eyes. And on that black and white television that I saw men doing the first feats and going to the moon, I could turn the channel and see our folks, Black people, struggling for our identity and for our rights. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I said, I can't imagine, what was this young 13-year-old thinking? We can see where I'm aspiring to be an astronaut, but yet my people are struggling. And I think I came to the conclusion that even though I didn't see anybody who looked like me at NASA, even though we were struggling, that I'm going to do it anyway.
All right. That's what I'm talking about because that's important. It's so important because, you don't see someone who looks like you and you still have that mindset and then you actually did it. And it's, for people who are watching who don't know, it's not easy to step into NASA and say, I want to be an astronaut. You have to be an exceptional person to be chosen for that program. So I read you were a pilot, you scuba dive, you did all these wonderful things as well as being a physician. So how did you get into NASA to start with? Like, what did you just say? I'm just going to apply and see what happens. What happened?
So when I got to high school, I had to decide on, what field I was going to go into. And I had been doing research at NASA. I found out that there was a doctor by the name of Joe Kerwin who worked as a astronaut, who eventually he was a flight surgeon and then eventually became an astronaut. And I said, that could be my path. So then I left high school, went to University of Houston as a pre-med student in biology, and then Texas Tech Medical School, and eventually did a fellowship at the Mayo Clinic, and then some other fellowships that allowed me to amass the expertise that I could then be considered to be an astronaut, have the qualifications to apply. Every year or every 2 years, NASA sends out a call for astronauts. And that year that I applied, which was, as I've said with the kids, 1990. So that was a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
And there were 6,000 applicants who applied, and they selected 23 of us.
Wow.
And once you are selected, you go through a year or two of basic training, and then eventually you are then assigned to a mission.
That is fantastic. So when you look up at the stars, what do you think? I mean, you have to have a different perspective.
Well, certainly, as a kid, one of the other aspirations, inspirations for me was looking up at the heavens and seeing those lights appear and saying, I want to go travel. I want to go see what those
I
are.
want to go there.
I want to go. So I think you alluded to it earlier. Sometimes you have to be a little crazy to think about getting on a rocket ship and blasting off in space. But,
I mean, when I look up at the stars, I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. I'm like mesmerized by the beauty of it all. Just the simple things in life, but I have to imagine that you're like, well, I've been there. I've been that way, close to them enough to really appreciate them. Well, on our show, we always ask our guests as an icebreaker, to give us one thing that most people don't know about you and tell our audience about it.
I don't know if I want to admit this, but I did put it in my new book, so I'm going to say it anyway. Okay. One thing that most people, they look at me and they say, you've done all these wonderful things. And, you're a pilot, you're an astronaut, you've done these crazy things. And I say, well, there's one thing I won't do, and that is get on a roller coaster.
Stop.
Really?
Now, why is that? You just don't like them?
I don't know if, when I was in middle school or high school, I went on a roller coaster and scared the mess out of me. And I said I would never do it again. I don't know. But it was so funny. My daughter, I think she was 10 years old, we went to the fair and she goes, Daddy, let's go on the roller coaster. And we called up and I was thinking, I'm going to get the courage this time to go. So because my daughter's asking me to go. So I walk up to the roller coaster and I look at the roller coaster. And just as I looked up, the car went by right in front of me. And I said, nope, I'm not going. Ask your mother.
I'm the same way, but that's why I thought I would never be an astronaut, because I don't like being upside down. I don't like being a roller coaster. But that's amazing. That's a good one. I really like that one. Now, I want to ask you about the spacewalk, because you made history doing that. And you were just recently, I want the whole audience to know, you were recently inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame a few months ago, too. So congratulations on that. I was like, this is well-deserved. Well-deserved. But the spacewalk, did you face any challenges on the way to that milestone?
Well, as a astronaut, the first thing once you're selected, of course, is to get into space. So that first mission was exciting. The launch was incredible. Once you get up into orbit, experience a microgravity where everything is floating. That is incredible. And the second mission, I did all of that, plus put on this 350-pound suit. We call it an EVA suit, extravehicular activity suit, EVA, the big bulky suit that you see is wearing. In fact, the picture next you can see it's kind of like that suit there. And you go outside. That had to be the most exciting thing. It gets your attention when you step out of a vehicle that's traveling around the world at 17,500 miles an hour, which means we can go around the world every 90 minutes. We get to see a sunset or sunrise every 45 minutes. And we were out for just under 5 hours or so on the spacewalk. And it was just incredible.
I can't even imagine. I remember being just amazed by the midnight sun in Iceland going around in a circle. So I can imagine what that must feel like. It has to be incredible. How do you stay focused, like to get to those milestones?
Yeah, I think it is being determined to do something and having the stick-to-itiveness that once you set a goal in life or have a dream in life to say, I'm going to do that no matter what. When I talk to young people, I say, if you ever need to decide on what you want to do, a decision that you have to make, you may see somebody doing something like I saw Neil and Buzz land on the moon. And I saw that and I said, hey, I want to be an astronaut. And then another time I saw an entrepreneur and I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I check it in two places. I check it in my head and I check it in my heart. So my head says, that looks like fun. That's something I want to do. And I'll research it. I'll find out what's the requirement is to be an astronaut or whatever, entrepreneur, or whatever it is you decide to do. And then once I said, that still sounds very interesting to me, then I switch it to the heart. How do I feel about that? How does this notion of being an astronaut make me feel? How does this notion of me being a venture capitalist, how does that make my heart feel?
That's
And
important.
if those two things check, we have checks and they match and they feel good, then you should do it.
That's really important. Now, I'm glad you said that. Your heart and your mind
Yeah.
must match. Now, let's talk about fear a little bit, because this goes into your book a little bit, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But fear. So we know you're afraid of roller coasters, but how about like just stepping out into the vastness of space? I mean, how do you manage that? Were you afraid?
I don't know if I would say that I was afraid. People have described us astronauts as risk takers. And I would say, yes, we're risk takers. But specific for me, I'm a calculated risk taker.
It's important.
So if I can be as prepared as I can to do a certain thing, an activity, doing a spacewalk, then that makes me feel as comfortable as I can be in doing something I've never done before. And I'll give you an example. The spacewalk.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time practicing underwater. You might have seen pictures of us in our suit practicing underwater. Why? Because when we're here on Earth, it's the only way we can simulate microgravity being in space. And so we spend hours upon hours doing that. So you get very comfortable in the suit. You get very comfortable in that environment. So when the time comes, even though you've never done a spacewalk before, you're comfortable in that suit and it's an environment that and then now you're able, you're not worrying about whether it's going to explode or leak and all that sort of thing, because you know that you can depend on that. And now you're able to go out and just enjoy the process, in our case, the process of preparing for the International Space Station. And yeah, there was a little bit of fear there, but nothing that can't be overcome by, being prepared.
So does that translate to here on Earth with managing fear?
You got it.
All right. That's good
Nice.
to know.
I like the way you connect to those two.
That's what I do.
We all have fear. We all have struggles. We all have doubts about ourselves. Even astronauts, whether we can do a thing or whether we're prepared for it. And we have to put that fear aside and do as much preparation as we can, so that when the time comes for you to do a thing, that you have the confidence that you can accomplish that. And so that's, kind of it in a nutshell. And then recognizing that even though you might look at a colleague, I remember being in medical school and I'm competing against people just as smart as I am and go like, should I be here? What, should I be here? And I realized that, they're probably looking at me saying the same thing. Right?
That's a good point.
Because we're all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes us successful is being able to say, yeah, I'm afraid. Yes, but you know what? That's okay. And depending on the situation, being fear sometimes provides you, that sense, that spidey sense, that motivation that you need to accomplish a thing.
That's fantastic. Now, I don't know how to phrase this, but I'm leading into something. Do all of the astronauts know each other or are familiar with each other, or is it just the cohorts that you came in with? How does that work?
Yeah, I think the process of our training really allows us to get to know each other.
Yeah.
So first of all, you go through the selection process. Come in. You're now part of a class, an astronaut class. And my astronaut class, and I think this is the first time I might have even talked about this publicly. So you're going to be the first, Janice.
Okay, good.
My astronaut class name was the Hairballs. So every
Not
class,
the hairballs. Okay.
that's a story in itself. But so we come in as a class and we train as a class for 1 to 2 years, learning how to fly jets, learning how to survive in different environments, land survival, water survival, and all sorts. And it builds this team, this camaraderie between your classes. And then once you're done, then you get selected for a mission. And now you're in a cohort of maybe 6 or 7 people that you're training with. And you train for another 2 to 3 years in preparation for that mission. So you get to know each other,
Really well.
each other's habits. And once you do that, you build this relationship and this team relationship that allows us to function as a team in accomplishing the goals of the mission.
Okay. Well, we have a question from the audience. I'm not sure if this is possible. This may have been before you were there because I think you were born around this time. But it said, in your training where you taught about or have you met any of the women recognized in Hidden Figures, the movie? You've seen the movie, I hope, right?
I've definitely seen the movie. I've definitely seen the movie.
Good.
And I learned a lot from that movie because I wasn't there, as you just alluded to. That happened many years ago. I have met their families since the movie. And so that movie really sort of underscored how important it was to have everyone contributing. Every group made a contribution to allow us to get to the moon. Even though as a kid, looking at the lunar program and looking at the early programs, I didn't see anybody who looked like me. But still and yet, it was confirmation that we were involved even during that period of time. And so it says that we can do anything that we can set our minds to. We have been contributing to this country since the inception. And so believe that.
Yes. Well, let's talk about the parents because many Black parents want their kids into STEM programs, and STEM is the buzzword nowadays. So, but they're not always sure where to start. And we have, kids all the time saying, I want to be an astronaut. I have a granddaughter that's the one thing she always says, I'm an astronaut. And she's 4 years old. What advice do you have for parents to nurture curiosity and a love for science at home?
So I want to start with something that I always talk about when I'm giving talks to audiences, whether they are elementary school, high school, college, and even adults. And that's remind people who we really are, that we are infinite beings with infinite possibilities. And it simply means, number one, that we're all born multi-potential with the ability to do anything that we want to do in life. Number two, that we're all born multi-talented. And those of us who are parents know that you can have kids come from the same genetic pool, but be dramatically different. And they come in with different, they're just naturally born with the ability to sing or to dance or their love for science or whatever it is. And you see that. And then you can use something called the brain to learn other things. And this is where parenting comes in. And that is when we can expose our young people to those things that they have an interest in. And maybe expose them to things that they are not even aware of so that they may develop an interest in it as they get exposed to it. And then number three on the infinite being with infinite possibility is that we are all born for a reason. And if you approach life with this notion that there is something or some things that I'm going to do in this life, it brings a different meaning to it. It brings a different urgency. You become more intentional in how you go through your day.
Absolutely. That was a great answer. Thank you for that. You've led national programs to improve math and science education. What do you think is still missing when it comes to STEM access in schools, especially in our Black communities?
Yeah, that is a great question, Janet. And to me, it's about the quality of education, and particularly in inner cities, in our rural communities. We need to make sure as parents, as policy makers, that we have high quality, or let me say it differently, that students have access to high quality STEM education wherever they are. So that may mean that we go and we're present at the school board meetings to ensure that. That may mean that we bring programs. There are STEM programs and after school programs that we make sure that those are available to our kids. And if they're not available in the schools, then we go find those programs so that our kids can get exposed to those. And the bottom line is, why is this important? Because in the 21st century, which I remind people is now, we're in the 21st century, technology drives everything that we do.
Yes.
In the 21st century, most jobs, I would venture to say 100% of the jobs require expertise in math and science. And it turns out that people who are in those fields make more money than those who are not. So why wouldn't we want our communities, our students, our kids to have access to that wealth, that ability to build wealth?
Absolutely. We should be at that table. That's where we should be sitting. So, no, awesome. In your new book, though, the newest book, Embracing Infinite Possibilities, I'm going to bring it up to here so everyone can see the cover.
Oh,
you talk about letting go of fear. We talked about that. How can we as parents teach our children to push past fear and to believe in the potential that we talked about?
yeah. I think reminding them, number one, of who they really are, that infinite being with infinite possibilities. And at every moment that you get to reinforce that tenet, that they can be and do anything that they want to be. That's what my mother told me when I came running to her and saying, Mom, I know what to be in life. She was an educator, always asking, what do you think you want to do when you grow up? And I finally had a good answer, I thought. I ran to her and I said, Mom, I know what I want to do. She said, what is? I said, I want to be an astronaut. And she did like most parents do. You go, oh, well, that's nice. Our kids come to us and they tell us they want to do this or that. And we sometimes don't take the opportunity to reinforce that. And I remember distinctly, she said, that's nice. And was starting to turn and walk away. And I think she realized exactly what I'm telling you. Now, wait a minute, this could be an opportunity. She turned around and she said, that's good. And guess what? You can be and do anything you want to be in life. That's reinforcing the positive. And we need to make sure to do that. Then we need to provide an environment that is nurturing for them emotionally. People forget about that. Kids need a lot of hugs. They need a lot of touching. They need a lot of reinforcement. And then bring those programs, expose them to things, to the science museum, take them to the science museum and to the zoo, and expose them to different things. These days we have the internet, so you can access just about anything, and be intentional and being online with them to expose them to the things that we want them to be exposed to, and that they may have an interest in. Does that make sense? I hope
Absolutely makes sense. Yes. Yes. Tell us about your books. This is the second one, and they both have the same title with Embracing Infinite Possibilities in them. So tell us about the book. Tell the audience what you want them to know.
So about 10 years ago, I wrote the first book, which was Dreamwalker. And it really was a memoir. So it was talking about my life. It was talking about the early life and then progressing up to the point 10 years ago. And one of the last chapters, I talked about the power within each of us. And I just touched on it. And it turns out that I really wanted to do this book, Infinite Possibilities, because I didn't really want to do one memoir. I'd say, who wants to know about me? What I wanted to do is I wanted to put together a collection of ideas and experiences that I have gone through as a human being on this planet, as a Black man in this country, Black person in this country, and say that there were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of people that told me that I couldn't do it, but here's how I overcame it. And there were a lot of fears. There was a lot of time where I needed to rely on faith. And so I talk about that. And so this book is about helping people find their power, And that's the whole idea, the infinite being with possibilities. The last thing I'll say, and sometimes we let fear get in the way of our success.
Yes.
And what we should be doing is embracing that fear and using it as a tool to be successful.
Okay. How do you do that? Do you mention that in the book?
I do.
Good. So get the book, everyone, so you
please,
can figure
please,
out how to manage it.
please get the book. And then we, on our website, theharrisinstitute.org, I also add some additional, if you go to the section that talks about the book, for each chapter, actually gives some additional insights as additional insights and learnings for each chapter. And one of those is about faith. One of those is about overcoming fear.
Okay. And the book is available now?
The book is available in any of the book outlets,
Okay.
Amazon, books.com, you name it, they have it. And it's both audio and also in print and,
Okay.
and digital.
Are you narrating the audio version or someone else?
Unfortunately, yes.
Not unfortunately, yes. No, that's great. That's because then people can hear from you and hear your voice. And then parents can even share that with their kids, especially if you say something very poignant that can relate to them. I like that idea. That's fantastic. You've mentored countless students over the years. You're a mentor. Why is representation in STEM so important? We talk about having a seat at the table, but especially now we have AI and all these new technologies that are coming on board. We didn't have electric cars about a decade or so ago. Well, we did, but they weren't available like they are now. And now the whole AI is just so interesting, where it's starting to seem like it's sentient, but it's not quite. But it's taken over, and I read where ChatGPT tried to hide itself on servers. So we're in a new world. We're totally. Why is this important for Black parents and to find mentors, especially like you, in the tech industry and that are astronauts, that are on the cutting edge of science?
So you've mentioned something that's sort of dear to my heart, and I go back to what I talked about, the importance of STEM. Remember, I said a minute ago that technology drives everything that we do, and
Yes.
one of the leading technologies is AI.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, this is not going away. It's going to get, it's going to be broader. It's going to have broader uses. And the only way in which we can stay ahead of that is that we have to have knowledgeable people working a lot alongside of the developers. In fact, if you are knowledgeable enough and have an interest in this, then you should become one of those experts in AI. One of the things that we found out early on in AI, that it hallucinates, that when it sees a gap, it fills that gap. It may not be the truth, but it fills that gap with information that it's pulled from whatever it is. And so we need people that can go in and work with AI and generate AIs that are more acceptable, that are more human, to put it that way. And human,
Mm-hmm.
when I have human tenets, because sometimes you can, if you're depending on robots or you're depending on AI, it can be, square. And that's not good for us as human beings. So we need to have some people that come in to know how to work with that technology. And that only can happen if we have people who have expertise in that area. The other thing I was going to mention is that we also notice that there is a bias, that in some cases, because of what the literature says about us as human beings, that bias that we have, those stereotypes that we have about different groups of us in this country, in this world, can get perpetuated or expanded with AI, because we don't have anybody that tells it that's not true.
Right. Right. And I've seen that. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. So it's so important. And that's why we need to be in development, research and development. It's
Yep.
so very essential.
It's no different than in the healthcare space when we have clinical trials. We try different clinical trials and we'll say this drug A works well for this disease. but it may only have been the clinical trial participants may have only been white males.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we need to make sure that more people of color participate in those trials so that we can learn more about the effectiveness of that drug in our population. So the same thing is true for AI. We need to be at the table as people of color, as Black people, as this is being developed, as this is unfolding. And the last thing I'll say about that, there is going to be a lot of wealth that's going to be generated by these new inventions. If we are not there, then we're going to lose out on bringing our communities up to the level of the rest of the world.
Parents, you hear that? So we need to nurture those curiosities about tech and the computers and iPads and whatever your child is using these days. Uh, you talked about your mom earlier when you told her that you want to be an astronaut, and she stopped and thought this could be a learning moment. What's something a parent can say to their child today that could plant a seed toward greatness like your mom did for you, basically?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to spend time with our kids, getting to know our kids, creating an environment where they get to know themselves, even more importantly, right? Uh, I I have done through our foundation. I've been involved in many different communities, inner city communities, rural communities, and what happens sometimes as parents is that we get so involved in making sure that there is food on the table and making sure that there are clothes on our children's back. And that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of energy. And those of us who parents know that that does, in fact. But we also have to pay attention to our children as equally as important. We've got to be there for them emotionally so that they won't be left out. So that when they have those questions about themselves, who they are, what they might want to become, that we're involved in that, that we're bringing them the necessary nutrients that they need in order to grow. And I know that's hard because I've been there already. Being a parent is, I think, the toughest job out there,
Yes.
but it's the most important job that we can ever have in our lives.
I agree. Is there a right age to start introducing kids to STEM, like toys, tools, activities, or whatever helped you explore science as a young boy?
Yeah, yeah. The earlier the better. Even with the toys, say in pre-K that you have that you're giving the kids, toys that are going to allow them to learn how to deal with spaces. We talk about blocks. I remember as a kid, the blocks, and we had Tinker toys. I don't think I've seen a Tinker toy in a long time.
These were great. Remember those?
We had Lincoln logs back in
Yes.
the day, and we were learning construction. So we're learning spatial orientation and how things go and how you build. Those things may seem pretty basic, but that is the foundation that we need to lay for our kids. And as they increase in age, then so should the complexity of their toys and the activities in which they do.
I like that. I like that. What legacy do you hope to leave for the next generation through your work in space, education, and beyond?
Oh, that's a deep that's a deep question. Can I answer the question this way? All the things that I have done, or let me say it differently, out of all the things that I have done, the thing that that I know I value the most is giving back to the community, and particularly to our community, to make sure that I am paying it forward. And no matter what we do in life, if we are paying it forward, it is the best investment that we can make. And I'll give you another analogy. When I left NASA, I started a venture capital firm called Vesalius Ventures, and its focus is in telemedicine. So we invest in technologies that bring healthcare directly to patients and connect patients to doctors and the like. And so one of the things that I love doing is talking to entrepreneurs. They come to me with their ideas about what they want to do, and they're looking for money, they're looking for advice, and I'm providing that advice. And the reason I was drawn to venture capital is just because of that. I've got these young minds, whether they're 20 years old or 65 years old, because I can't tell you, every entrepreneur that comes through my door is excited. They have that youthful energy in that. And my job is to nurture that, because if it works out well, it's going to work out well for them. It's going to work out well for their families. It's my investment in them, monetarily and also emotionally. And that's the same way I feel about investing in young people, whether they're in high school or college or young adults.
That's great to get. I'm so happy that you made it and you reached back, you're giving back. Would you say that is your greatest mission so far out of all the things you've done?
Not only do I call it my mission, I call it my ministry.
Your ministry. I can relate to that. Your ministry.
I come from a long line of ministers.
Okay.
Probably 2 generations of ministers. And even though I'm not a minister myself, I look at this as a mission, as a ministry.
I totally can relate. Successful Black Parenting Magazine, I always say, is my mission. So it will continue to go on. So tell our audience once again where they can follow your work, your books, and the incredible programs that you do lead.
So you can get both of the books, The Dream Walker, the first one, and also Embracing Infinite Possibilities at any of the book outlets. And again, it's available audio, digitally, and please take an opportunity to get. And then also go to our website, and that is theharrisinstitute.org, theharrisinstitute.org. And you'll see some of the activities that we've been doing as an organization, and also some more details on the book.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for coming on BACKtalk today.
It has been my pleasure. I've had a good time.
I did too. It's fantastic. All right. We'll talk later. Hang out backstage for a minute. Okay. And a big shout out to all of you watching the video today, the replay that you'll be watching later. This episode of BACKtalk is by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. Be sure you follow us on social media. Click on everything, follows, likes, ads. All of that helps us to thrive as well, so that we can help you too. I wish all of you the best and much success. Take care, and thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to BACKtalk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. We'll see you soon.